President Trump taking a victory lap at the signing of the U.S. China Phase 1 trade agreement, but the president also made clear that we shouldn't expect tariffs on China to disappear anytime soon.
I'm leaving them on because otherwise we have no cards to negotiate with, and negotiating with Leo is very tough. But they will all come off as soon as we finish Phase 2.
Joining us now to talk about those Phase 2 negotiations, a key member of the Trump trade team, Peter Navarro, assistant to the president and director of the Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy. I saw you making the rounds yesterday. I was watching the signing ceremony. Peter,
good morning, Joe.
There was a festive mood in the room, I must say. Let me ask you, Peter, and you're known to be somewhat hawkish. We had Steve Bannon and hedge fund gentleman Kyle Bass on yesterday that both pointed to the notion that the tariffs were remaining, so that it's not just a folding to China to get more agricultural products. They, in other words, I think Bannon was saying that the president got the best of China. That's not what you're hearing in mainstream media, or from Chuck Schumer or the Democrats. You're hearing that that we folded, didn't get anything, and we're just back where we started after this exercise.
Well, let's talk about what we got and what we didn't get. What we got in the Phase 1 deal is very strong protections for intellectual property, which is worth about $300 to $500 billion a year if we can get that moving. We got a good start on forced technology transfer. We've got a strong currency manipulation provision in there. Those were three of the original, what I call the 7 deadly structural sins. And above that, of course, we got some very good purchases, $200 billion over the 2017 benchmark, spread out over 2 years, spread out over 4 sectors: ag, energy, financial services, and manufacturing. And of course, we got financial market access, which has been kind of a white whale for the folks on Wall Street that you interact with every day: banks, credit card, insurance companies. Yeah. So that's a solid Phase 1. What we didn't get is what we have to search for in Phase 2. That's the unfair subsidies, the state-owned enterprises, certainly the cyber intrusions. Joe, this was a big one for me. It's just insane that Chinese government officials continue to hack into American businesses to steal trade secrets. And the 7th deadly sin, of course, is the fentanyl that kills over 50,000 Americans a year. So this was a great day yesterday for America. Let's be clear about this. We brought the Chinese to the bargaining table, and we got them to sign a deal that's good for America. We've got a lot of work to do, but that's what President Trump does. He does a lot of work.
Hey, Peter, you listed a long chain of things that we'd be looking for in Phase 2, some pretty important things, as you mentioned, cyber terrorism and other issues along those lines. Those seem like really heavy lifts. Do you think that list is the white whale in terms of trying to reach a deal with China?
Well, it's not cyber terrorism. What it is, Becky, is cyber theft. What the Chinese do, and they do it, uniformed members of the Chinese military sit in Shanghai and hack into computers here in the United States of businesses. They'll sometimes sit there in what they call these advanced persistent attacks, where they'll sit there for a year and they'll watch things, they'll steal things. It's very destructive to our businesses. They promised back in 2015 to stop doing it. They didn't stop doing it. So that's something really that we take very seriously here, that we need to address. But again, yesterday was a great day. We got a great start on these structural issues.
You didn't include IP theft in the Phase 2.
Oh, that's the first one. That's in Phase 1.
That's what I mean. But
yeah.
So that's done, and that's why that's my question. You feel like the what's in Phase 1 is tough enough to solve that problem? Because a lot of people, Rick Scott, Senator, among others, saying that they've made promises in the past that they just don't plan on living up to. One of the things that didn't go back into the deal that caused the breakdown in April was some of this going into local law over in China, and that didn't happen either. Why do we have a mechanism to hold their feet to the fire when if they continue to steal IP, Peter?
Let me quote one of your guests yesterday. The enforcement mechanism, as the president said yesterday, is firm and controllable. It's as one of your guests said yesterday, judge, jury, and executioner is on our side of the fence. So basically the way this works, Joe, on a 90-day clock, okay, this is not your father's World Trade Organization dispute resolution that took 3 years and got us nowhere. This is a 90-day clock controlled by Ambassador Robert Lighthizer at the USTR. If there's an issue, it comes to him. He negotiates with his counterpart in China. And if we don't get satisfaction, then we unilaterally have the authority to take proportionate measures. But why don't we deep dive a little bit into this intellectual property theft, because it's an abstraction when you put it that way. But one of the purest expressions of IP theft is the counterfeiting. And there's a great section that nobody's yet really talked about in the deal on counterfeiting, particularly over e-commerce platforms. And this president, Donald J. Trump, always likes to skate to where the puck's going to be. So this White House, for many months now, has been working with Customs and Border Protection, doing what we call Operation Megaflex. So every month, CBP has been opening thousands and thousands of packages from China and Hong Kong, looking very carefully at what's under the hood. And we're finding, Joe, it's an astounding rate of discrepancies. It's been an average of 15% of the packages coming in. And remember, there's about 1 million a day come in just to Kennedy alone. 15% violate some regulations. Half of them are counterfeits. The other half are things like controlled substances, deadly fentanyl, by the way, gun parts that shouldn't be coming in, fake driver's licenses. We have license in this new deal to crack down very heavily on that flood of counterfeiting. And these e-commerce platforms, Joe, the Amazons and the Alibabas, Shopify, they have been facilitators of the Chinese counterfeiting. And so if we're going to enforce this deal, it's going to be a big part of that is scrutinizing this. But Peter, the deal gives us the ability to do it.
You just mentioned two U.S.-oriented companies, at least both in the context of Amazon and Shopify.
Yeah.
What kind of regulations would you want to implement, and what kind of responsibilities would you want to put directly on them?
Well, we don't love regulations in this administration, but what we do love is corporations accepting their appropriate responsibility. Right now, it's skewed. You know, if you're an intellectual property rights holder, whether you're Michael Kors or Louis Vuitton or Pfizer selling prescription drugs, the onus is really on your company to police the internet, where a lot of this counterfeiting occurs. That's not right. Amazon, Alibaba, Shopify, JD.com, Walmart.com, all of these companies have a responsibility to police the problem. And here's where the problem...
How do you plan to hold them accountable?
Yeah, but let me say this. The big issue with this counterfeit chain is with what's called third-party online marketplaces that pop up in places like China, and then they plug in to the Amazon or Alibaba hubs, and then they reach the consumer. And let's be clear here. You get defrauded when you buy a counterfeit, but sometimes these things can kill you because seniors buying prescription drugs. There's actually in the deal, and I'm pointing down now because I have these pages in front of me, there's actually a portion in the deal about counterfeit prescription drugs. So we've got to figure out a way to tackle this problem,
but Peter,
and we're going to do that.
What I'm trying to get at, though, is...
I know what you're trying to get at. You want me to say what kind of regulations, but...
No, it's not regulations. I just want to understand, to the extent that you want to hold the... look, we want to all hold China accountable.
Sure.
To the extent that we have American companies like Amazon and like Walmart acting effectively as distribution arms through these third-party mechanisms, how, to the extent you want to hold them accountable or change that dynamic, what does the administration want to do?
Well, CBP...
If you're Doug McMillon or Jeff Bezos and you're listening right now, what are you trying to tell them?
Oh, I'd love to tell. I've told Amazon, I've told eBay, I've told all these platforms. We've had them here at the White House. It's like, look, this is harming your consumers. It's harming your business model. You're making a bunch of money off these folks selling this counterfeit stuff, but you're not accepting your full responsibility. CBP has tools. There's suspension and debarment if you get chronic serial importers bringing this kind of stuff in. There's civil fines and there's penalties. There's all sorts of things you can do. But the best thing is for China, first of all, just to police those online marketplaces, and it's right in the deal. It says they got to do that. And right here in America, it would be nice if the e-commerce players, whether it's payment processors or whether it's the e-commerce hubs themselves and everybody in between, assume some responsibility for this problem. I mean, look, let's go back to the numbers here. 15% of the stuff that's coming in right now that Americans are buying is contraband. And it can hurt you, it can defraud you, and everything in between.
How do you feel about Huawei in terms of them? And we talked about them, and people have been described as a chess piece. We talked about this with the Secretary of the Treasury yesterday in terms of how the U.S. government wants to approach that company. And by the way, maybe even you want to comment on what's going on with Apple, because some people look at that backdoor situation very similarly to the Huawei situation.
Yeah, Andrew, my three favorite words on TV in the swamp, not my lane.
Okay. You like to go out of your lane with stock market calls.
Hey, are you guys going to have me on when we breach 30,000 on the Dow and play my clip predicting it? Are you going to do that for me?
You didn't give me your latest What's your I don't remember your target from last. What you want to do? An S&P?
Come on now.
You want to do an S&P target?
I predicted 30,000 on the Dow.
Okay.
Back in July.
I know.
Back in July,
I know.
if we got USMCA passed and we got interest rates lowered.
Peter,
and you and I did 25,000 on the Dow the day after the election.
What determines whether phase 2 goes past the election or starts right away? Is that the Chinese? Is it President Trump? Is it? I mean, what's key to having that start right away versus being pushed back?
Every time I've walked across the street to the USTR, his door has always been open.
Okay.
There's your answer.
Okay, so we'll see. So are you saying we'll see what happens? I know someone else likes to say that a lot. Anyway,
my favorite person on the planet here. That's what he loves to say a lot. Hey, I mean, look,
let's see what happens.
This is incredible. Today we might get USMCA a day after we got a phase 1 China deal.
Right.
We got the greatest labor market in the last 5 decades. I mean, this is just a beautiful thing, and I think Wall Street is voting in favor of that.
We're seeing another triple-digit gain a day. Peter Navarro, thanks.